Good evening. Call this meeting of the school committee on September 15th to order. Welcome everybody. Welcome to the new school year. We'll start our evening with the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Doesn't look like a lot of people out there recording.
For the record, we will check to see if anyone is recording, and it looks like the answer is no.
That might be.
And also offer an opportunity for public comment, which I think is probably not going to be taken up on. So we will move right to our consent agenda, which tonight, of course, includes the minutes. Minutes were sent to you a while ago, and a copy is in your packet. These are the minutes from the August 4th meeting, the retreat.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
I suggest a motion that we move to approve the minutes as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on approving the minutes as presented? And those in favor, Greg?
Aye.
Larry?
Aye.
Alicia?
Yay.
And Karen?
I have to abstain, I wasn't there.
All right, and the chair votes aye, so it is 4-0 with one abstention. Thank you, everybody. We'll go right into our superintendent's report. Mr. King.
Thank you. Just a very quick update again on the remote meeting potential for this particular room. I spoke with the town manager earlier this week. They did have a meeting, I believe, Friday a week ago with a consultant that comes in and specializes in this type of thing. He anticipates having a solution implemented possibly prior to the holidays. So that's currently the timeline. As we kind of mentioned in the past, they're looking, they've actually brought someone who specializes in sort of audio video production as opposed to just a networking person so that they could actually integrate the two sides of that. They feel confident with this consultant that they could possibly have this done prior to the holiday break. So just wanted to keep you updated on that as to whether or not we can have those hybrid meetings that I know that have been in conversation.
Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Karen.
by holiday break, I'm assuming you mean the long holiday break versus Thanksgiving?
Correct, correct.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Others? So obviously the ultimate goal is to have a technological solution for the town. So not just our committee, of course, but for other committees, other ad hoc committees that come up within town government.
Correct. Any meeting that would take place in this particular room. Yep.
So that certainly leaves our group with information about what the town is doing to possibly put us in a position to broadcast or make our meetings available through another modality, possibly, it sounds like, as early as the holidays, maybe sometime after the holidays. Does that affect the way in which we would like to operate, or is it the pleasure of the committee to continue with the modalities that we have used, in-person, television, until the town has a solution?
Mr. Chair,
Yep.
I would suggest that we just continue doing what we've been doing until they figure out how the system's going to be set up.
I'd support that.
I concur. I think if we're trying to, as much as I would like to see us do remote prior to that, I think that trying to mess with Zoom on somebody's laptop, especially after the issues I had with mine today, might be problematic. So I think if we can continue, I mean, it's only another couple months.
Mm-hmm.
Agreed.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. King.
One
Certainly.
more, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair.
Yes?
One more question. Do we know, since occasionally we end up upstairs in the 4th floor, do we know if there's going to be any opportunity to use that modality also up in that room?
I can't answer that directly, but I don't believe so. This is for the broadcasting capabilities from this
Just in
particular
here.
room. And the issue happens to be that the technology we have there in the back room, as I understand it, is relatively old, and trying to connect that with modern technology is what's standing in the way. So bringing in somebody who really specializes in that is what the town manager is attempting to do.
Okay, so we need to do better at coordinating meetings amongst our committee and other committees so that if we're going to have meetings and we want them to be open to that modality, new modality, or newer, again, modality, that we make sure that we're able to utilize this room more consistently without last-minute changes, I guess. Thank you.
Okay. Great, thank you. You have other items to present tonight?
I do. If you didn't, it's not on the agenda, but I just wanted to give a quick transportation update as well, if I might. We've constantly been working on bus routes, as we mentioned, I think, in the last meeting. We did reduce the sort of walker radius, if you will, down to a mile, which did add a few bus stops, specifically to our secondary stops, and I think that's been very helpful. The other thing that we're doing, and I just wanted to kind of show here tonight, that we've added around Toy Town. We've added a path at Toy Town, so if those of you who don't know, here's just sort of an aerial shot from Google Earth, quite frankly, of Toy Town. So where we have Grove Street out here out front, and we have Murdoch Avenue down the side. And so if you're a parent or family that works around Murdoch, you'll know that down this side here where I have my cursor, down Murdoch Avenue, is where the buses currently line up for drop-off and dismissal. Additionally, there's no sidewalk anywhere down Murdoch Ave. So in the morning, if you were to drive up, or in the afternoon, almost the length of Murdoch Avenue from Grove Street to at least the rear of the property, and possibly beyond, but it's about the rear of the property, which is right here in this corner, is a line of buses. And so that kind of presents a bit of an issue for our walkers and our bike riders that come from sort of back in this area behind, that neighborhood that's behind. So in walking this area over the past couple of days, I recognized that this back corner right here sort of had a natural opening.
Yeah, the fence ends.
I'm sorry, the fence ends about, somewhere in here, and then there's an opening between here and there's a driveway you can see at this house.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I see why here. Let's bring that up a little bigger. Is that better? There we go. And so, so this is a look down Murdoch, where you can see there's no sidewalk. There's a fence line here, and there's some trees in here they're clear to the best of our ability. It's where the buses drop off and pick up. So what I noticed the other day is there's this natural opening there at the rear of the property. And so we've worked with the town, and they've been really responsive, working with Brian Croto out of the Department of Public Works. We kind of proposed to him, is there a way that we could get some help putting a small path in here? And so as you can see, they came right out. They literally started the day we spoke to them, which was Wednesday, and continued the work on it today, to create a path to connect from this back corner of the property into that basketball court. So what it does is gives the students an opportunity to come back there off of Mill Street. There is a sidewalk that comes down Murdoch Ave right to that last driveway, and connects right into this pathway. So the town has come out, helped us create this path, at which point when the students, this path will connect, this is the basketball court, at which point they have a clear path all the way up to the front entrance of the school. So it'll just kind of keep the kids off that street where there's no sidewalk, and also keeps them out of all that bus traffic. We anticipate that being available as early as next week. They actually dropped some crushed stone on that today. They did all the excavation for us. And that'll now give, I think, a better and safer access point for students that are walking and riding their bikes into Toy Town, especially with all those buses down Murdoch Avenue right there. So just wanted to give an update. We're sending that out on Parent Square tonight, so the parents, kind of see some pictures of it and where it is. Again, it's that rear corner of the property back there off at Mill and Murdoch Ave. Should be available next week. I did see bike tire ruts on the path today already. So the students obviously picked it up. I counted about 8 bikes, which I was really happy to see at Toy Town just the other day in the morning. So, I know there's a lot of folks that live back in that area, and so I think it'll make a safer path just to get to school. So just an update, and big thanks to the town as well for helping out.
Mr. Chair?
Larry?
Go ahead, Larry.
Were you before me?
I just said, that's okay, you can go, I don't
Oh.
care.
Okay. Well, first of all, I applaud the fact that you and the town worked together to come up with a solution. I think that's great. But years ago, 100 years ago, on Murdoch Avenue, across from Grove Street in front of Old Murdoch, that's where the buses used to be, and there's a sidewalk there. So why did they move on to the other side of Murdoch Avenue when this side has a sidewalk and there's a guard there, right? A crossing guard?
There's a crossing guard at Murdoch and Grove, that's correct.
Yes.
But we still have a lot of families that do come from back
Right.
behind.
So I think it solves that issue.
That's the issue that I'm trying to address with this.
Right.
But the buses lined up there, they changed that last year. And what it allows for is parent drop-off. So the change that also happened is parent drop-off now comes up through, if I may, parent drop-off is now, the cars come up in the morning. Oh, I guess you can't see my cursor up here. The cars come up in the morning through the U right there in front of the school.
Yeah.
So the parent drop-off lines up there, as opposed to this, used to be they actually parked across the street at Old Murdoch, and then all the students that were parent drop-off actually walked across that crosswalk. So we reduced the number of students, basically getting dropped off and walking across the crosswalk by having the parents actually drive up to that U, and now we're just down to the walkers that are actually, in theory, actually using the crosswalks.
So it's not a safety issue to be on the other side of Murdoch Avenue with all the buses and the kids getting off the buses?
Correct, there's no buses over there anymore. On the other side of Grove Street, you mean?
Yeah, Murdoch Avenue's going north. You see,
I think every kid is getting off the bus and hopping onto the grass.
right,
nobody
but what
ever
about the winter?
What about what, I'm sorry?
What about the winter when the snowbanks and stuff and the kids get off that bus and they have to walk down to the corner of Grove Street and up unless.
Oh,
they-
no, so what happens is the buses are lined up there on Murdoch Ave, and the first bus that's right there at the corner of Murdoch and Grove on the school side, so they're all lined up there right along the school.
Yeah.
The first bus opens their doors, lets the kids out, it's plowed right there, they get right onto the sidewalk and follow the short amount of sidewalk right up to the U there and right up into the school. And so as one bus drops off, they just do one bus at a
Excellent, all
time,
right,
they're
so
not
they do one
walking.
bus at a time.
That's correct,
All
they're
right,
not
that makes
walking up
sense.
that, yeah.
Then that makes sense. Thank you.
And just as an aside as well, since you mentioned weather, the path that we're creating back there from the back of the property is in such a way that we'll be able to plow that or snow blow it over the winter, so it'll be open year-round as well, to keep kids off those snowbanks and kind of along Murdoch Ave there trying to get to school.
Right?
Mr. Chair, not that I want to create more expense or work for anybody, but I'm wondering if it would be worth speaking with Brian and getting at least a rough idea of how much it might be to actually put an actual paved path over this location, perhaps raised a little bit, because anyone that knows that back area by the basketball court knows it's basically a wetland. And it turns to mush real quickly, having taken my grandkids through there more than once. And I'm just wondering if, especially in the spring, if that might discourage people coming from the Mill Street area over from using that and trying to get around the buses.
Yeah,
I
it's
mean,
a great point.
This is good for now, but I'm just wondering for future discussion.
It's a really good point, Mr. Vine, and something we discussed there. So the path that's going in, it's actually dug out. So the excavator actually came through, and I thought I had a picture of it in here. I didn't put the picture in, but you can see just a touch, he had just started. Yeah, you can
Yeah.
kind of see here that it's actually dug out and down. And what we're putting in there is crushed pavement. So the pavement that they pulled off of, I assume it's coming from Central Ave, where they put that then through a tumbler and crumble it down into, I don't know, small stone, if you will. So it's actually the crushed blacktop that's being poured in there, and it is raised above the grass line there. So we did talk about the fact that that sort of turns into a mushy area, and from this picture, the picture on the right up there where you can see the excavator, there's a drain off to the right-hand side, and that area off to the right-hand side is the part that really gets swampy. So in talking to facilities, it's to the right where they at times get stuck. And this area is, the highest area coming through there, this little path area.
Okay.
And we are raising it a bit. So if we need to improve it over time and it serves it's not improved as well as we'd like to, then we'll continue to address it.
Yeah, see how this works first. and then-
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So, Mr. Chair, and I'm going to kind of come off that, and you partially answered my question regarding whether it would be plowable or able to be snow blown, but where it is crushed pavement, I am a bit concerned that it'll just be swept away by the plows or the snow blower, because quite often we see that happen not only with looser fill, but also I've seen it happen with speed bumps. So I am a bit concerned that by doing it this way, I don't know what the cost is to do it this way now. However, I'm wondering if we're actually doing something that's less cost-effective by doing it this way, because you're going to have to keep refilling it, because we're just going to have to keep adding to it. My other concern is that where it is a boggy, swampy area, when it is, the middle of winter, and I know that our facilities staff tries to do a really great job, but I also know that, we have skating rinks at times, not through any fault of theirs, but because, they go out and they salt and sand whatever they can, but that's going to be a constant area that they're going to have to keep going over. And I just wonder how we're going to keep up with that and make sure that that's kept up with, and that the town doesn't keep plowing in the end of it.
So a couple of things, and I understand all the concerns. And those are the concerns we discussed when we we stood in this site with Brian Croto to talk about all those things. So one, this will all be compacted in between Brian Croto and Martin Johnston. They both felt very confident that we could clear the snow off of this path, and this was, as opposed to using other types of stone/gravel, things that are at our disposal that we could put in there. They felt comfortable with that. If it doesn't prove to work out, then we will certainly look at a more permanent solution going forward. In terms of, and this picture I left up intentionally relative to kind of the snow removal. So currently, we remove snow from in this picture, I'm standing at the end of that little path where it connects. This is the basketball court, that corner, and turning around and looking. We currently clear snow to this point already. So, we will continue then to just continue that path on out to that back gate. And in terms of anything building up in front of the little entrance there, just a couple of points with this. We are going to have Jersey barriers on either side of it, so it will limit as well anybody trying to, another concern that we had was anybody trying to kind of drive down this path or providing a different type of access than what we're really interested in. So we will have Jersey barriers on either side of that to restrict access. And, certainly the town, and Brian was very aware of the fact that, this is something we're trying to provide access year-round. So relative to the snowbanks or those types of things, it'll be cleared, each storm. So,
Awesome.
we'll see how it works through the first winter, and if we need to improve it, then we'll improve it, going into the next season. But, for now, I know we've had a number of families that are interested in trying to have a little bit better access and have concerns about their students walking down along those buses if they're walkers coming from the neighborhoods behind us. So, just wanted to do a basic improvement, a sidewalk. It just as an aside, a sidewalk all the way down Murdoch Ave, just that one side along the school is over $100,000. So, this seems to be a much more reasonable approach. And, it also gives an access to the entire community, to the basketball courts and playgrounds in that way as well, without having to walk down the street.
Thank you.
I think this is a good idea. Thank you for taking the initiative on addressing that.
Absolutely. All right. ESSER report?
Yes, please.
So an ESSER presentation here tonight. I have a few things to go through with ESSER to give you an update, and this is specifically on ESSER 3, which is the largest and final ESSER grant that we have. Just a little background, ESSER 1 is essentially closed, so I believe we've done the paperwork to close out ESSER 1. That was the earliest that we had when, sort of COVID first came out, allowed us to purchase a lot of, equipment, masks, to kind of prep the schools to reopen, so on and so forth. Not the HVAC specifically, but this did a lot in terms of hand sanitizing stations and all those things we didn't really have when we entered into COVID. ESSER 2 was the second one, which was around $1 million. We earmarked, I believe, out of that million, almost it was $500,000 to $700,000 for transportation as a precaution against any COVID problems when transportation kicked in. If you'll recall, limiting the number of students and the buses and all of those types of things. We have had to tap into that a little bit in terms of the transportation, but we probably have a couple of $100,000 left in that one to spend at this point. So we're looking to, and I'll talk as we get through this ESSER 3 presentation as well. One of the ways we're looking to maybe close that one out. That one got used, again, for a lot of supplies. You'll recall as well, we had to spend some money to shore up Toy Town, the HVAC there. We had a large HVAC project at the high school. So those types of things all went into that ESSER 2 grant. So ESSER 3 is the grant that we're using really. Go ahead, yes, sir.
So ESSER 2 was approximately $1.5 million was reserved for transportation.
Correct.
How much was HVAC?
I'd have to get you exact number. I don't have those numbers off the top of my head, but it is where I think we had to use about approximately $100,000 for the additional piece of beyond the earmark for Toy Town, and then we also spent quite a bit at the high school where we had to go through and revamp the dampers and at all of Murdoch. I can get you exact numbers on that. I don't know them off the top of my head. I'm sorry.
I don't think we need another presentation on 1 or 2, but when we're done with this, maybe just 3 spreadsheets to show buckets of categories for 1, 2, and 3, I think would be
Absolutely.
informative for us. You probably have those, in the office.
We can pull them and put them together, and I would need to put them in a way that would make sense to you in terms of what the items are, but I think you'll see a little bit tonight in the way it's grouped, that maybe we can group it like that so you can see it. You'll see what I mean here in a second, I hope. ESSER 3, just to be clear about what we can use this specific grant for, and just to be clear, this is what we've tied sort of the strategic plan to. So when we talk about what we're paying for the strategic plan out of, it's coming out of ESSER 3. So we can use ESSER 3 funds to pay for anything that we would have paid for out of our, what we call our 240 grant, which is our special education grant. So our 2 largest grants that we get annually are the 240, which is the IDEA or special education grant. We use that often to pay tuitions. We use it to pay for special ed services, those types of things. We can also use the ESSER 3 grant for anything for which we would use the 305 grant. That's the largest grant that we would traditionally have. That is, again, a federal grant to improve academic achievement of disadvantaged students. And most specifically, that grant is relative to the numbers of or percentage of low-income families. So every district gets a different allotment of that grant, and it's basically calculated as a part relative to your Chapter 70 and the number of sort of low-income families as a percentage or a whole number. It's, again, one of our larger grants, and it's used to basically close academic gaps or to make it more equitable for those who are disadvantaged. So, and then the other 3 pieces that are outside of kind of, grant usage, if you will, our traditional grant usage, close educational gaps due to COVID, which is a very broad kind of swath that we can use. address social emotional learning gaps and addressing of mental health issues as a result of COVID. So again, a very broad sort of area. And then air quality / HVAC issues we can use this grant for. Of course, you can use it for supplies like masks and COVID tests and those types of things, but at this point, we're not looking at that. So really what you're looking at is activities that are addressing learning loss as well as social emotional issues. And it really provides a very broad use of funds, which is an advantage in terms of the way we use this. So the way that, just to kind of give a little background if you're not familiar, the way that the federal grants work is it's sort of a backwards process in a manner of speaking. They first tell you how much money you're going to get, but they don't give it to you. And then they ask you, however, to tell them how you would spend said funds, and then they approve that, and then they give you the money. Now, if you start spending the money a little bit differently, there's an amendment process. So what we have are large buckets. And so there's about 9 large buckets, but these are the primary buckets that you would use. So we have a bucket for staff salary. It's actually a separate bucket for stipends, but staff salary is a bucket and stipends are a bucket. Contractual services, which is really, really broad in terms of how you can use that money. Supplies and materials, travel, and then other, as if the other things weren't broad enough, we just get another category, which oftentimes has to be tied to the other broad buckets. So what happens is we tell them that we would like to spend money in a certain way out of these buckets, and if we find that we are spending too much money in one bucket relative to what we said we would spend and less in another area, if it goes beyond 10% of what you said, you have to do an amendment, which is nothing more than saying, hey, by the way, looks like we had a change. It's just another process. It's more paperwork. You go back in. And I'm bringing that up because you're going to see some things here in a second. So when we put in for this, again, this is before we really got into deep in our strategic plan. So they asked us to, basically tell them how we would spend $2.4 million over the course of a couple of years. This expires, just because I know that question will come up, in FY25, which is a bit misleading. It's September of 2024. So really we have it for this school year, next school year, and then the summer of that FY25. So a few months from July through September, which gives you the opportunity to sort of close up some loose ends, if you will. So it's really for the next 2 school years. We're looking at spending approximately $2.4 million. So when we took this initiative, we used a number of different places. We used surveys that we've had that go out to faculty, to families, to students and whatnot, and wants, desires, et cetera. Every year we looked at our strategic planning, what our deficiencies were relative to COVID. We took a number of different sort of data streams, if you will. And at the time we had some broad ideas. Staff salary stipends we put in for $500,000. We put in for contractual services, which is exceptionally broad, consultants and presenters. And the next screen is going to show you what we've spent it on more specifically. Software is under contractual services, so if you sign a contract for something, that can also be contractual services. So if you think of our Renaissance or Power School implementation to get it off the ground, which are big dollars. And then summer and after-school academic programs are also allowed to be a part of the ESSER funds. Of course, supplies and materials, curriculum and school materials is what we were asking for, as well as sort of network hardware and classroom technology to bring those up to speed. Travel we had for $300,000, again, thinking of our consultants, any professional development we might need to be doing and sending folks to different places. At the time, we didn't know what we would have to do to get the professional development. And other, we put in for $600,000, and that's the biggie that's in here is the HVAC in the Murdoch Auditorium. If you'll recall, a couple of years ago, we talked about doing a short-term fix, which is what we currently have, just to kind of get it to limp along for a couple of years in order to get us to a more long-term permanent fix. Which is a pretty large dollar investment. It could be up to $300,000, possibly $400,000 for that HVAC just in the auditorium. The reason behind that is the current HVAC system in the auditorium is based on the old Freon, which you can no longer purchase. or you can at very expensive rates, and it's becoming diminishing. The way that we were able to limp along is they were able to extract the current refrigerant, somehow save it, and put it back in once they put in a new compressor. But those materials, it's not the best way to go about it. We're limping along. So the reason for the high expense there is we would have to actually install a complete new system. And it's up on the rooftop. So it involves, cranes and so on. The chairlift, which we've been talking about at Toy Town for an extended amount of time, it's around $50,000 to $60,000. Transportation in general, we put into other, and then just kind of doing a handicap accessibility review across our schools. If there's anything that we need to do, we could use this money toward that. So again, thinking back to the fact that we can spend it on anything we would spend on special education funds, and 305 gives us that ability to kind of use it for the chairlift, as well as handicapped access if we need to. So,
Mr. Chair.
Larry?
When you talk about the chairlift, are you talking about the elevator at Toy Town?
correct.
Yeah.
Which is not really, for those that don't know, it's not really an elevator. It's,
Right.
it's actually in a stairwell, short stairwell at the front of Toy Town there. If you were to go in the main entrance and take a right, it's the stairwell at the end. And it's a chair lift that you sort of operate if necessary. Runs along the handrails and makes the loop and comes around and brings them down to the first floors. Ours is exceptionally old, where you can't get parts at this point due to its age. It's also very difficult to get new ones these days. DESE and the state of Massachusetts don't look very highly on these chairlift types of devices. If you think about it, you have someone who might be in a wheelchair that rolls into a platform. You kind of put up a gate around them, and then it swings around the stairwell. So we're looking to, and we have some estimates on putting in a full new system, so we no longer have to fight the parts that we can no longer get. So
DESE, did you say DESE has an opinion on those? They don't care for those, is that what you said?
DESE and the state of Massachusetts do not look highly on the chairlifts anymore. They're actually very hard to get permitted at this point. They would prefer you to have an actual elevator. So the permitting becomes very, very difficult. So we do have some folks, based on that building and the age and the extent to which we would have to go to actually install a formal elevator. If you think about what they did over at Beals Library, I think they did this where they kind of set up I think, if I understand it correctly, they actually kind of put out a wall and put it up outside, almost external. We would be looking at something like that. The cost would be prohibitive. So we have been told we can get the permitting to actually continue with another chairlift. So at this time, it's the best avenue, I think.
Mr. Chair.
Care?
Didn't we try to get the town to add that to the capital plan, the chairlift?
The chairlift has been on the capital plan for a number of years as approved, and they like it, but not funded. I
Okay.
did speak with the town manager, as a part of this funding and us working together, that we can take that off of their capital plan,
Okay,
since we have the capacity through a grant to actually pay for that.
okay. That's what I was trying to remember, if we had it approved or not, and I couldn't remember. That's why I wanted to refresh myself. Thank you.
You're welcome. So this is what we requested going into this. When we asked, they asked us how we would spend it, this is what we told them. You don't have to get overly specific when you tell them how you're spending these things. To date, what we have done, so again, remember that it's for $2.4 million. We've spent essentially a third of that to date, which will get us through a lot of this year already. So just to kind of alleviate any alarm, a lot of the investment right now is in professional development that we've already delivered, as well as supplies that we've already purchased to get that math implementation off the ground. So currently, professional staff and / stipends, the teachers' union, when we negotiated that contract, part of that was a COVID bonus, if you will, or a COVID pay. What you see up there is essentially that COVID pay for the teachers that's already been paid. It came out, I think, last week, actually. So that's what that represents at this point in time. Contractual services, you'll recall that was a very large number in terms of what we asked for, over $700,000. To date, professional development consultants that we've used, Looney Consulting, McGraw-Hill are both math consultants for ongoing coaching as well as our specific math implementation, where we brought them out specifically. The Hill Literacy is specific to early literacy at Memorial, where we implemented phonics training, ECRI training this past year, so that's being used to pay for the consulting, the ongoing consulting to implement that through the Hill Literacy Program. And Orton Gillingham is a Tier 3 intervention for special ed services as well as dyslexia. So we have, and I think you heard Ms. Haru when she gave our strategic update, how we've delivered that PD and trained the trainer model. So again, the model going forward is we're getting all of this professional development relative to our strategic plan, and along the way we're training ourselves to train ourselves going forward. So kind of a train the trainer model as well. Educational supplies, materials, you know, the IM math materials, so K to 12 is a pretty hefty investment to get the materials from K to 12. The early literacy materials, kind of again connecting back to that Hill Literacy. There's an IM math platform. We ran a summer program this summer. We also ran at Toy Town. We ran February break and spring break sort of academies at that school. So it's not just a summer program. And then we also have the Renaissance assessment platform. So it might be noted here that we put in for approximately $300,000 if we were to go back a page. We put in for $300,000 for supplies and materials, and we've spent $500,000. So again, thinking about that amendment, but also the flexibility around contractual services. I'm telling you tonight what's in those buckets. However, you know, when we go back through and review, it's very simple for us to move those things around. So as an example, what I mean by that is I would probably look to move the Renaissance assessment platform up into the contractual services. It's a software contract, so that we don't have to do, we would prefer not to do amendments if we don't have to, because it's just an extra step. I would also look to move the IM math platform up and so on. So we have some flexibility. You know, it's just where it got paid from initially, but then we can move it around to make sure that we have it in the right places. We have some limited travel that we've paid for to date, $575. That's oftentimes for our consultants that come in. They bill us for mileage and those types of things. And then the other, what we have currently spent, and we've spent approximately $7,000 on a special education program. That's not the extended school year program. We also ran a special education summer school beyond our ESY this summer that we've not really done in the past. So it cost us about $7,000 to run that over the summer. This past year included food. We fed the students, you know, paid for stipends and so on and so forth, transportation, for about 4 to 5 weeks over the summer. That was in addition to our ESY, or extended school year. So to date, that is what we have spent out of ESSER 3. So where I mentioned that I'm looking to possibly close out ESSER 2 is to actually move, we have about $200,000 left in ESSER 2, and we might look to move those staff stipends back into that ESSER 2 grant, which could close it out, and, you know, free up another $200,000 in this ESSER 3. Thinking, of course, that we've got an HVAC system that we haven't looked at yet. We've got the chairlift, which we do have estimates for. It's probably coming in around $50,000 to $60,000. So freeing up a few extra bucks would be helpful. And I'd like to just close out that other grant would be nice, and have what we have left here in this ESSER 3. The other piece then is, of course, the ELA adoption and implementation that we have going forward into next year. So, you know, just trying to plan for that so that this money lasts us through that full implementation of next year is what we're really targeting, as well as all of our social emotional. One of the things that's not up here is we've used a lady named Jessica Minahan, who's somewhat internationally known as an author and behavior analyst. She's actually local.
She's the best.
I'm sorry?
She's the best.
Yeah, she's amazing. And so we've contracted with her. She's going to be doing the training in district. She came out for one of our retreats, and she's been working with some of our adjustment counselors already. So I didn't get that in here, but that's, you know, another piece around social emotional and sort of mental health training that we're also implementing. So all of this is tied directly to our strategic plan, as opposed to just sort of extraneous costs at this point. I think that's that's the last slide. So that's kind of the numbers as they stand today.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Questions, comments? Mr. King, I just want to say that I am thoroughly impressed by the diversification of the expenses and the use of them for one-time costs. The investment in instruction is obviously part of ESSER 3, not so much of the other federal COVID grants. And the fact that not only have you covered the mathematics curriculum and have allowed that to come into district at reasonable cost, and doing it on one-time federal grants is impressive. And that you've already answered my only question, which is, will this be covering the cost of the ELA once the ELA curriculum is decided upon? So that's absolutely fantastic. Probably the only question I have is regarding whether or not you expect right now, knowing that you've got some variables in construction costs and things like that, do you expect that your planned expenses will spend the ESSER 3 through the end of FY24?
Are you asking if we'll be able to spend all the money?
Will you
Or
have
if it will
extra?
it last?
Yeah, maybe both.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, that's the ongoing sort of, piece, the monitoring, if you will, of the funds, is trying to look ahead. And I think once we have the math implementation, as well, we'll have a rough idea of what the ELA implementation is going to cost, if you will. We have some other grants. The nice piece about the ESSER grants as well is that you're able to, quote unquote, supplant, which is a big deal in the grant world. You can use the ESSER 3 monies to supplant as opposed to just support, which is really important, which means we can use this money to pay for things that we might have otherwise used other grants or other funds to pay for them with. So the supplanting rules are moved aside. So it gives us the flexibility to move some things in and out. So as an example, we're about to kick off our ELA process. And so in terms of, instead of necessarily putting how we're going to be paying those stipends over the course of this year, there's going to be a lot of meetings for this. We have some other grants that we can put that into for now. If we need to, we can move them in here and free up those grants, but that supplanting rule really gives us flexibility that we need and kind of can allow for that last second adjustment, which I really like. So what we're doing is trying to take a big picture, not just look at the ESSER 3 grant, but we're looking at our existing 240, our existing 305. Those are our largest grants, and making sure that they're sort of playing in the sandbox together really well is really the big piece. The other part that I just want to point out is, the software piece is the recurring cost. And so what this has given us the flexibility to do is pay for those. It's the upfront costs that are really the big expenses. So when we think about Renaissance, it's an upfront adoption cost that really costs us in the onboarding. We'll be able to afford the annual sort of cost for that once we get through we wouldn't have been able to afford the upfront costs. Same with the Power School. We can do that upfront with these grants, or this grant gives us the flexibility to pay for that possibly out of other grants. So we can afford the upfront cost, and then going forward, we can afford the ongoing cost because it's much cheaper once we get past those. So right now, this is the daily monitoring, quite frankly. There's a lot of time spent in Munis watching these grants to make sure that it lasts and pays for everything that we want it to pay for.
Great.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Others?
No, I just wanted to comment. I just want to comment. I think it's a really solid plan, and it takes in a lot of needs that our district has needed for many, many years. We just never had the money to do it. And so you and your team's thoughtful approach as to what the needs are, especially math and literacy, because that's where it's at, especially in the elementary schools. You got to get the kids on the right path right from the beginning. And the summer program and the Renaissance program, all these things, and it's going to contribute to SEL when the kids know that they have what they need to progress. It's a well-thought-out plan.
Great. Thank you.
Actually, Mr. Chair,
Great.
I don't want to throw cold water on anything, but
You will.
these grants, as we all know, the ESSER grants, like you say, comes to an end in September of '25. And maybe it's a little early to start talking about this, but once these funds are gone, when does the planning start to see how we pay for continuing these initiatives once that money is no longer there?
Well, the nice thing is that a lot of this, whether it's the software or the curriculum, the big upfront cost is getting the materials, getting the it's all the things that this is paying for.
Oh, yeah, I understand that.
The ongoing costs are manageable. Well, or the
Well,
superintendent can
yeah, I
say,
mean,
I think
Isn't
the
that what you
ongoing, it's a great question, and I think the planning already started. When we created this, that was, and actually this year's, general budget, those were all part of the plan. So if you think about the 240 grant that we get annually, as well as the 305 grant, those two combined come in somewhere, just off the top of my head, somewhere between 750,000 and $1 million annually, the combination of those two grants. So we'll be able to use those grants to maintain as we normally do. So if you recall, we put all of our professional development costs into this grant over the next couple of years and took it out of our general budget. So we're not paying really, other than professional development for central office, that really, it wouldn't be appropriate to cover that out of these grants. We've put all of that into this ESSER grant, and if you'll recall, what we did is we put a line item in the general budget for $100,000 for just facilities projects. So as an example, of a little project we're doing out back. And we have some other things going on as well. But when ESSER goes away, so does that $100,000 line item for just facilities projects that we never have been able to get to. So, the plan was to also use this to sort of be strategic about doing things that we just haven't had the funds to do over the past year that we sort of ignore and hope they hold up, right? So when ESSER goes away, then we bring those PD lines back into the budget as well. And then along the way as well, what we've been doing is this, what we call a train the trainer model. So not only are the teachers just getting professional development, we're going the extra mile with a certain number of teachers so that going forward, they can be the trainers for new staff and so on. So, that's the plan as it stands today, and as you know, a well-laid plan, but that's what we're looking at.
Paying for some of the upfront costs is obviously, we need to do it. But software, we have to have it, but, there's an effective life to that software, and there come a point where we're going to need to replace that. And I guess that's a bridge we cross when we come to it, but I think the public needs to know that the federal fairy godmother isn't going to be giving us this stuff forever here.
That's correct. I hope I make that point enough. This money goes away. It's a one-time, gift, and we're hoping to use it well for the community.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, and I'm going to bounce off Greg again. I think we are, great minds think alike, Greg. And I think that was my concern too, is that, 5 years from now, or let's say 10, let's be generous, 3 years from now, when this grant ends, we may still be using these programs. However, let's say, and don't kill me, Larry, let's say you decide to move on to a different district and somebody else comes in that thinks another program is better. We're going to have all the same upfront costs again, and so on and so forth. So I hear what Greg is saying, and that's one of the concerns I have too, is that, we have to plan ahead. And I know that's not going to be your concern once you leave. However, some of us are still going to be in this town and need to think that far ahead. So I think that, and I think it's great, everything that you've thought through here, but my concern is that we do have a tendency in the educational world to change programs pretty often.
Mm-hmm.
Something new and shiny comes along. Desi says it's, okay, not Desi, but somebody says it's a great new program and we change programs. So I'm just a little concerned that we might be, in that boat fairly soon, sooner than we would like to be. So I think you've done a great job thinking this through, but I am a little concerned. It's not your fault.
No, if I may.
I'm just commenting.
If I may, regardless of having this grant, you'd still be in the same boat.
I understand.
You know, I mean.
I'm not faulting you.
And I hear all your concerns, and I think my approach is, we haven't been able to purchase any of these things or do these types of initiatives, especially K to 12 in this district, for a really long time. And that predates myself and many others. And it's an opportunity that we really had to seize. What you're saying is 100% true, but that's not really relative to this grant. I think we're going to be in that boat, and we've been in that boat in the past, and we haven't been able to do anything with it. I think, you know, a variable that goes with this, and I'll say that, you know, you all know here that maybe some of the additional grants management has not always been as efficient as we would have liked it. And I think, you know, if we also at the same time do a better job at how we sort of manage all of our grants, not just this grant, and not have to return funds and not have to return, say, you know, our special ed money, those types of things, because it wasn't spent when it was supposed to, then we're in a better position going forward to actually make changes as they come down the track. And I think those are some of the things that have sort of handicapped us in the past, was that, you know, we might not have been as efficient as we should have been with some of the monies that we do have. And so I think that would be my response, in hopes that we can have all of that. You know, I think we've come a long way to clean up a lot of that grants component. We're really close at this point in having really everything on track. You know, all those old grants have finally been closed out, and we're current and trying to close out those things at the appropriate timelines and get the money spent to the best of our ability from some of the older grants, and moving things around so that we're spending all the money and not sending it back. And hopefully that sets us on the path that when this goes away, we're in a better financial sort of situation, assuming grant money continues in its normal form. You know, we continue to get funded through 240 in the Title I grants the way that we currently do, which is never a guarantee. But assuming those funding models continue in the way that they've been, you know, my hope for this town and this school district is to put us in a better footing in spending that money more efficiently as we go forward, so that at least when we approach that hurdle that will happen, we're in a better position to, you know, sort of attack it.
And another question, just because I know, you know, and you are talking about, you know, how you can close out ESSER 2 and, you know, by changing a few things. You know, one of the things, and I remember when you guys you and Joan had to come to us and tell us that we needed to do something about the dampers in Murdoch. And everybody was like, oh no, how much is that gonna cost? But let's say we run into something else like that. I mean, are you gonna have the ability to use where we have a little leeway here? Or if need be, are you gonna be able to do that with this money? Do you feel confident?
If something comes up, then we'll have to be you know, we'll have to make adjustments. And
Right.
so as an example, you know, maybe we would have to limp along with what we're doing at the high school auditorium a little bit longer. You know, I don't know, but if something were to arise that we're not currently aware of, then, you know, we have to make adjustments, and, you know, we'll do that. We'll bring it to this committee, and we'll make the appropriate adjustments to do what's best for the district and the students.
Not that I want anything to happen, I'm just, thank you.
Same.
Mr. Chair, if I can, just one final comment. You know, I've been on the committee since 2015, and I feel a lot more comfortable where we are now than at any other time during the 7 years I've been on the committee. So, and well, that's due in large part to you and your team. And so I personally want to say I appreciate that, and thank you for your efforts.
Thank you for the kind words.
All right. Thank you very much. Great report. Good to know. We are in a circumstance now that likely won't be repeated. We find ourselves in a fiscal year where the calculation of our funding for schools from the city and the state has resulted in a strong budget for FY23. At the same time that we are finishing, well, we're only in the third year of 4.5 years of ESSER grants.
I think so.
Where these things are possible. And fantastic that we can do them now. It won't be forever. All right, let's keep moving. We've got new business coming up with what looks like a field trip request in your packet. You have information about students from multiple schools making their way to a couple of businesses in southern New Hampshire for life skills and other experiences. Mr. Superintendent, do you have any other information on this for us?
No, essentially what you covered. This is our sort of annual, we'll call it a field trip, that this is really for all rooms to get out and do vocational work. We do a lot of that up in Ringe, at the Market Basket and so on. So this is an ongoing all-year approval, if you will, to do those trips and get the kids out into the community and do some of the work that they need to do.
Fantastic.
Mr.
Entertain a
Chair?
motion? Yes.
Can I make a motion that we accept the proposal for the field trip request as written?
I second that.
Fantastic. We have multiple seconds. Liz can figure out who was first. And so we have a motion and a second for the field trip approval. Any discussion? All right. Those in favor, Alicia?
Yay.
Karen?
Aye.
Larry?
Aye.
Greg? Aye. And the chair votes aye, and it is unanimous. Thank you. Next on our agenda is the Massachusetts Association of School Committees delegate, MASC delegate, and I might ask if Member Karen would like to speak to this a little bit,
What would you like me to say?
or I will. We have a opportunity to represent the school committee to the Massachusetts Association of School Committees for the purpose of being represented generally and being represented at their event that they're holding this summer. To do so, we have an attendee at the conference, that is Member Cast, and we also have the opportunity to appoint a delegate for the purpose of representing the school committee. Any others that have been involved in being a delegate before? Of course, I have not, so anyone else been a delegate before? Anyone speak to the role any better than I did?
Well, kind of, sort of, I was a few years back. I think when I first got on, and I attended a couple of their workshops that they provided at the Cape, at Hyannis, and it's not a lot of heavy lifting. I mean, they send you all the materials and you do your reading, and then they have, I think quarterly, they've been Zoom meetings. And, you know, they talk about the issues that they put out in their materials and whatnot. So it is a good thing to keep abreast of what's going on in the field. And certainly, I think the MASC, the best thing about it is that the training that you can get and the knowledge you can get on school law and on budgeting, those two in particular I found really helpful when I first got on the board, because, you know, the budget is so complicated, and the state formula that they use is so complicated. You really need to attend. I attended 2 workshops on the budget, just because the first one I said, well, I think I got it. Then when I went to the second one, oh, I missed that. So it's a really good thing. And you have a voice, you know, you have a voice. I know that Ellie over at Ashburnham, I'm forgetting her last name, but she's been the president.
Ellen Holmes?
I'm sorry?
Ellen Holmes?
Yes,
Yes.
yes. I served with her on the FLAG, which is no longer FLAG. Oh, no, CAPS, was CAPS. Ellie was on that too. And she would share things as well. And so it's worthwhile for someone. So whoever thinks that they are interested in that kind of stuff is it would be worthwhile.
Do we have any member that is interested?
Mr. Chair, can I just add to that?
Yes?
At least for the mass conference, it's also important to have a delegate selected to vote for our board, because they do have, as part of the conference in November, there will be things that the school committee members will be asked to vote on. And obviously, it's important for our board to be represented and to not just be there in attendance. You know, it's great to go to the workshops, and I love their workshops. And unfortunately, you didn't have Tracy back then when they were doing the budget stuff, because she's amazing with the budget things. But I think that's one of the most important things, is making sure that our board is represented, to make sure that our board is known to be active in MASC too. So I think that's helpful too, not just, and I think, as Larry said, you know, it's also important to be part of the division. We're in Division 4, so.
Do we have anyone that is interested in serving in the role of Mass Delegate? Any nomination? Oh, I'm sorry.
I will do it if nobody else wants to do it, since I'm going to the conference anyways.
Any
So,
other?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to nominate Karen to that role.
I'll second it.
All right, we have a nomination. Any other nominations? All right, we do have a nomination and a second. Any discussion? All right, can I have a motion to that effect?
Oh, I thought that was the motion.
I'd like to suggest a motion to appoint Karen as the Winchendon School Committee MASC delegate for the purpose of voting at the annual meeting.
Second.
First, motion and second. Any discussion? All right, those in favor. Karen?
Aye.
Alicia?
Yay.
Greg?
Aye.
And Larry?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. It is unanimous.
Congratulations,
Thank you very much, Karen, and
Thank you.
congratulations. You represent us well. When is the conference again?
November 2nd through the 5th,
Right, coming up.
down at the Cape, in the cold.
Fantastic, thank you. On to, any other new business? All right, moving on to old business. This is an item that we discussed at our last meeting and decided to continue it to this meeting, and that is the definitions of our subcommittees. You have in your packet a suggestion for purpose and/or charge, as well as definitions, and in some cases, requirements suggested by Member Vine for some of the various subcommittees.
Lifted by Member Vine out of other school committees.
Stole, not lift, not stolen.
Plagiarized.
Inspired by.
There you go.
Inspired by other.
There you go, like that one. If you haven't had a chance to, please go ahead and take a look at it. If you have already had a chance to take a look at the text, any feedback, any thoughts, any additions, identification of omissions, anything?
Mr. Chair,
Greg?
I don't mean to put Karen on the spot, but she did
Yep.
email me a little earlier today regarding a couple of items regarding the Communications Committee, and then just some information on the Policy Subcommittee as well. So Karen, if you want to talk about that a little.
Yep, and I have notes. And I apologize that I didn't get them to you sooner, Greg, because my computer's about to be drop-kicked into Narragansett School. So I had made the suggestion to Greg that we also add another bullet point to our communications subcommittee, that we establish a working group inclusive of, and I want to see the way I worded it to Greg, because it was much better than what I originally have in my notes. Establish as necessary working groups inclusive of stakeholder group members to improve and enhance communications with the Winchendon School Committee and Winchendon Public Schools. And I can send that to you. I already sent it to Greg. Now, for policy subcommittee, and I actually meant to send this to you too, Ryan, but I knew you were in the middle of a field herding cats. There are actually requirements and there's a nice write-up by Mask, because I happened to be on their website yesterday looking up something totally different. And I can email that to all of us, and I don't think you want me to read the whole thing, but if you do, I will. But it talks about the responsibility of the school district policy committees and how, and I'm just going to read you. Let's see. It is imperative that written guidelines be established so that your school system will not flounder from day to day. These guidelines, called policy statements, are local matters and may vary widely from one community to another. And this is seen as a primary function of the school committee. So this is something, as much as this policy subcommittee statement says that the policy subcommittee is tasked with ensuring that the school committee's policies remain up to date and in compliance with the law, I think we need to put in here somewhere what's written in Mask's policy, if that makes sense, because I think this gives the impression that we're just okaying other people's policies.
Do you want to write something up?
I will.
And
I will.
yes, I was thinking what we could do is vote on the package, and the motion could include the proposed changes with it. I did, well, I'll let you finish.
No, I think you have it. I mean, that's,
Okay. And the only thing I wanted to add was regarding the CPAC. I wasn't really suggesting that we have a CPAC subcommittee, as it were. I was thinking that we may want to follow the example of Newton, and I'm assuming other school committees, and having a liaison with the CPAC, but without insinuating ourselves into their meetings. I think we would want to contact them first to see if they're comfortable having a school committee member participating as a liaison and having, because to be honest with you, if the time that I have, I can't keep up on necessarily all the concerns that folks that are involved with special education and special needs have. And frankly, I'd love to have someone who has a knowledge of it and who has the time to participate with the CPAC to be able to come back and give this committee updates on what those concerns may be regarding. Obviously, we can't discuss specific students, but just regarding the operations of special ed in the district.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
isn't there a school administrator on that committee?
On the committee or as a
On
part
the
of the?
CPAC.
In CPAC, I think usually Ms. Haru is a part of CPAC in general, yes.
Yeah. So I think she's the liaison, and I think she's the one that we could have.
Okay.
She could be the person that could give us updates on CPAC.
Absolutely.
I don't think we need a school committee member there. I think we have an administrator there that I assume she goes to the meetings, and she can give us an update every now and then on how things go, or bring concerns to us if they need to be addressed.
Mr. Chair.
Sure.
So just to, and I'm going to go back, because I did chair the special needs pack for Boston for 7 years. And I know that I am a train the trainer for special ed laws and regulations. The special ed administrator, unless invited by the special ed PAC, should not be attending the meetings because of the fact that this is supposed to be a group for the parents and constituents and students of the district to speak about things and be able to have discussions about the district and any issues they're having within the district. And that's not my role, that's IDEA, that's what IDEA and Mass 603 CMR says. So as much as Nicole is a liaison, it wouldn't be a bad idea to have our co-chairs of the CPAC. So this is what most CPACs do, is they give quarterly reports, or however often they want to the school committee.
Okay, so I guess, Mr. Chair, I'm sorry. So I guess my question is, why does the school committee have a subcommittee if we're not allowed to be on it? And
I've never seen a school, I know that Greg found this from, where was it, Newton? And as I said, that's why I questioned this, because it's very, I've never seen this in any other district, and I've done trainings in several districts, so.
Because since I've been on, I don't remember us being involved in
Yeah, no.
CPAC. And I do remember the chairs of CPAC making a presentation here, I think a couple of times. They made presentations here and invited us to their open house and those kinds of things. But I never. And then I think previous director, she used to go to at least some of the meetings because she used to talk about them when she was here. When she came to school committee meetings, she actually came with the two co-chairs. So I just assumed she was attending the meetings.
Correct. I don't think it's uncommon for them to be invited to attend.
Right, I think.
Pretty typical.
So do we need a subcommittee, I guess is my question. If we've got,
Well, I guess we don't, not a subcommittee, but a liaison, I guess. If we don't, we don't. It was just a suggestion.
And I don't think it's a problem to necessarily have a point person that people can reach out to if they feel they need to, but if we're saying that as school committee members, we're obviously not the people that are dealing with the day-to-day,
right,
then they should be going to Nicole, or if Nicole is not responsive, they should go to Thad. And then if Thad is not addressing their needs, then they should come to the full school
yes,
committee.
I think that's the right process.
You
I don't
know,
think we need a
so and that's exactly what I taught my SPED PAC members. So, I mean, it's not that they can't reach out to us, and I'll be quite honest, that as a special ed advocate, I've been approached by people in this district to help them, and I've had to tell them because it would be unethical for me to do any special ed work in this district as a sitting school committee member.
Yeah.
And I've told them, look, I can, point you to where you can get an advocate if you need one, and I will give you Nicole's number, and luckily, for the most part, Nicole or Suzanne were able to handle the situation, but, there are certain things, it's not that administrators cannot go to the meetings. If they're invited by the chairs, they're more than welcome to go to the meetings. Just like if we're invited to the meetings, we can go. And quite frankly, as the parent of a special needs student, I was automatically a member of the SPED PAC for the past 2 years, and I could have gone to those meetings. But I would not have been going as a school committee member. I would have been going as a parent.
If I may, I think we're saying the same thing.
Right.
We have the opportunity to be invited to the CPAC, and it sounds like there may be consensus that the liaison from the school committee may not be necessary.
Right.
An agreement?
Yeah.
But I would like to see us put on the agenda and talk, and I'm happy to talk to Pam, because we do talk fairly often, about maybe having them start doing reports as often as they'd like to the school committee.
Who?
Pam Smith, I'm sorry, one of the co-chairs of the CPAC.
Yeah, she was on the school committee for a while, so.
Yeah.
I would like to know more frankly, about what, the parents are dealing with and what issues they're facing, and we don't get a whole lot of that information coming into the committee.
And maybe
I'd like to see more of that.
and maybe we could get updates from Nicole
On the
too,
agenda.
just on general, maybe a
Well,
couple
how
times
about we
a
just
year.
do if the school committee would like to see an invite of CPAC on a quarterly basis to get an update, and they are so inclined, then we can get them on the schedule, on a quarterly basis or more often if necessary. And Ms. Haru's going to be in here more regularly anyway, giving updates on varied topics. So hopefully that would serve the purpose.
COVID,
Sounds good.
Thank you. Yes, please. And
thank
Karen,
you.
to the extent that you want to liaise with Pam on that, that would be wonderful. So back to our subcommittee definitions. If I may provide some feedback on the couple that are here, specifically on page 1, the policy subcommittee. Under the requirements, it says an ability to meet during the day in person or on the phone. I'd like to suggest striking during the day in person or on the phone. Obviously, we need the ability to meet, but that specificity to day, time, and modality I don't think is necessary.
Yeah.
Also on policy subcommittee, Karen has suggested adding the MASC specific language, which Karen will provide to at least Greg and Liz, who will likely be receiving
Right.
this text in the future. Any other thoughts on the policy subcommittee as drafted by Greg? Borrowed by Greg? All right.
Inspired.
Collective bargaining subcommittees, I think this one is written very well. I have no changes. Any suggestions, changes, additions to the collective bargaining? The communication subcommittee, on page 3, we have gone over, and I agree with Karen's addition to establish as necessary working groups inclusive of stakeholder work groups, stakeholder group members. Any other changes to the communication subcommittee? Very good. On the finance committee on page 4, I'd like to just question, and this really is a question, in the second bullet where it says review quarterly projections. I think we review a little more often the
Yeah.
actual budget. I don't know so much that we would have projections per se, other than, moments in time picture. Perhaps we might want to change review quarterly projections to review
Monthly budget update?
monthly budget update. Is that a good
That's
edit?
fine.
Monthly.
Because I'm not married to this. I just thought it would be good for us to have some sort of guidelines for these.
Yeah, I think this is very well written. I mean, these are perfect for what we needed. Also in the finance subcommittee, I don't have all the text yet, but I'm going to ask for a little leniency from the group in adding a bullet regarding grants, that the subcommittee just be aware of, able to be informed on grant activity.
Oh, perfect, yeah.
Can we add to that grant activity, give me a second,
I think being informed
not just informed, but.
on grant activity covers it.
On grant activity and, I'm having a moment.
You just remain up to date on grant activity.
Let's come back
And
around.
compliance.
Compliance.
Well, because where we have gotten into trouble with grants before,
On
I don't know
grant
if
activity and
compliance is the right
compliance,
word.
Yeah, and compliance, that would cover it too. That's good. Be informed on grant activity and compliance, yeah.
just because I think
That
that,
does it.
I've heard so much, we were in the tail end of fixing the really bad issues with the old grants, that you and Joan worked to get all And I'd like to make sure that maybe the finance subcommittee is getting updates on that at least a couple times a year. Just given everything that's happened.
I'm sorry?
Given everything that's happened.
Okay, I like that idea. I mean, I like that addition. Any other changes to the finance subcommittee? All right, CPAC liaison, I think we've covered that. We're probably going to
That's out.
strike that one. And we do have a good number of other subcommittees. Ones that come to mind are capital planning, calendar,
Town audit committee.
town audit. Would it behoove us to work as a group now to define some of those, or would we like to do so outside of this group and maybe vote on those at another time?
Can we just do it in a Google Doc through our email?
Option 2.
Yeah, I think,
That would be great.
Option 2.
That was 4 votes for option 2. That's the efficient, folks.
We'll be here till midnight.
I don't,
By the way, this, if I may, Mr. Chair, this is the kind of stuff we should do at the summer retreat.
Yes.
This is what the summer retreat is for.
Right.
Is to do this kind of work so that we hit the ground running.
indeed,
So we should remember that for next year. Hey, don't be taking mine.
sorry. All right, so, is anyone willing to take the lead on at least sharing, well, how about if I ask Mr. Vine to share the template that you've already shared with us?